What's up guys, me Jamar Dawson, hope you're doing great today. And what I wanted to talk about was a topic that everybody seems to be talking about because everybody is feeling these days, and that is inflation. Unfortunately, you got the talking heads, you got the media, you got the politicians especially, and they're saying, oh, well, it's due to multifaceted things, and they're trying to point to specific events. And no, look, inflation is very simple. It's based on very basic economic principles that we learn in Economics 101. Don't listen to these other folks. It comes down to some very simple concepts. The red flags were out there. I was telling people that there were some of the warning signs for inflation, the telltale signs. They're out there, and we need to make some changes. But mostly because of politics, we went down a certain road, and as a result, here we is. So the Consumer Price Index rose 8.5% from this March to last March. Consumer Price Index, or CPI, is a measure of the rising in prices of the majority of all goods. So people say it's a great measure of inflation. 8.5 is pretty bad. We haven't seen that in over 40 years. So what does that mean? We may talk about that in a later video, but in this video, I wanted to give a basic inflation 101, define what inflation is, and really talk through what causes inflation. Forget all the BS, forget all the extra stuff. I'm gonna speak to you straight. Let's get into it. This is gonna be from a business perspective, not from a political one, not from a one that has ulterior motives. I got an MBA, I've taken several economy classes, and as a small business owner, I'm feeling some of the effects of these things as well. So I just want to talk through these basic principles, objectively, no bias. Principle number one is called the demand pull principle. Basically, when your supply remains the same, but you have a massive increase in demand, then you know what? You're going to have to raise prices as a vendor or a business to be able to maintain. We see this a lot when you have a massive increase in the money supply. We see this a lot when the federal government orders for more paper money to be printed and put into the circulation. We saw this as a very beautiful, shining example with the stimulus, right? So the money supply increased, people had more money out there, or at least there was more money in the supply to be circulated out there, and the demand to purchase increased a little bit more. We also see this principle right around Christmas time, where let's just say somebody wants to go and buy a pair of Adidas or whatever, right? Or some New Balances or some Under Armour. I'm avoiding one particular brand, obviously. But let's just say you want to go and buy some shoes or a camera or a streaming PC, right? Well, if everybody's trying to do it, then the vendors can raise the price because they know the demand isn't necessarily going to fall when they raise it up incrementally. That is called a demand pull. The next concept we're going to talk about is what's called the cost push concept. So this basically occurs when the production cost for a good increases. If it costs me more money to produce something, then I have to pass that along or push that along to the consumer. Let's just use a very basic example, right? Cost push is one of those things that can be easily seen as a gamer, right? So if you want to get into gaming and stream Fortnite or Call of Duty, and you're trying to build a gaming PC, and you go to the store and you see, what? I thought this graphics card is supposed to be $250 normally. That's what I budgeted for a couple of years ago, but now it's $750. What's going on? Well, the cost to produce that graphics card, the supply chain, the shipping, all these things have increased, and the sum total is a higher production cost. Guess what? That gets pushed onto you. That's called the cost push methodology. And so unfortunately, we have to pick up the tab, but that is one of the principles of inflation. And then the last principle we're going to talk about is called the built-in principle. So this typically happens when wages increase outside of a typical forecasted long-term financial plan for a business. You guys all know over the last couple of years, people have demanding higher salaries, higher minimum wages really is what it comes down to. A lot of places went from $7.50 to like $15 an hour. Unfortunately, if that wasn't in a business's long-term sustainable model, or at least growing slowly up to that point, then they're gonna have to have some hard decisions to make. And I told people publicly, okay, hey, get your money, boo. I actually have a business, and part of my business is to help people get more money, right? I write resumes, I do career management planning, so I'm not in any way against people making more money. Get that money, bro. But if the government falls to pressure to artificially raise wages too quickly, businesses are going to respond by increasing their prices and pass that on to the consumer. So let's just say we're paying somebody who works at a restaurant double what we used to pay him before. Well, if that wasn't the financial plan for the next 5 years or so, businesses are in business to make money. So instead of them going into the red, because a lot of restaurants operate right on that margin of being profitable, now if they have to pay everybody double per hour as a basement wage, I was gonna say salary, as a basement wage, they're gonna have to adjust the end cost to the customer. So yeah, you might be making more money, but in order to eat at that restaurant, theoretically, that you work at, it's gonna cost more money to buy food. So did you really get an increase? That's what drives inflation across the board. Higher wages equate to passing those costs, like we talked about in the second principle, on to you, the consumer. Another thing, and this is not within the scope of this discussion, but I might as well talk about it here because I talk about it every time I talk about this related topic. Another downside and negative effect of rising wages too quickly and artificially due to exterior pressure. If you do it too quickly outside the forecasted plan, guess what happens? Businesses say, wow, we gotta pay people $20 an hour now instead of paying them $6.95. We probably should have paid them $8.25 or maybe $9.35, but $20 from where we were, let's add some AI, let's add some robots, let's add some self-checkout lanes. That is what you're seeing everywhere. When I went to McDonald's and I saw some self-checkout kiosks, I said, man, things are changing. I warned people we need to rise things slowly and basically negotiate what you're worth through your resume and adding value, making sure you're having credentials and classes and all that kind of stuff. Instead of that, we just wanted to artificially push a wage increase too quickly through the system for a lot of political reasons. A lot of the politicians stood by it, and now we're at an inflationary period as a result. So those are the big three. There's some other things that work in concert. There are actually multiple things that can work in concert to cause inflation, but those are the big three. If you have those three economic principles working together, man, it's gonna just about guarantee inflation. So as simple as it gets is supply and demand. That's what I kind of wanted to talk about today. That's really what causes inflation when you get the graphs out of whack, especially when there's external pressure. I was a big voice for, hey, as we're going through the pandemic period, let's be very conservative financially with all the money that we're throwing out there. Not necessarily the stimulus payments, but the politicians really wanted to spend a lot of money on stuff that wasn't related to recovery. I said, let's just hold on in case we have inflationary events. Let's hold our cash so that we could distribute it as needed and invest in the right places and put the plugs where we need to plug them. But of course, they don't want to do that. And then now the government's acting like, well, we didn't know that what we were going to do was going to cause inflation. You have some of the greatest minds working for you on the payroll, and you are lying through your teeth if you say that you could not see some inflationary red flags on the horizon. Any 18-year-old that takes a freaking economy 101 class learns about these principles that I just talked about today. Heck, if I'm a YouTuber talking about it, then the government should have had access to that information, right? You would think. So anyway, hope you guys are blessed. I just want to talk about what inflation is and what are the things that cause inflation in the very near future. Man, I'm going to have some guests on. We're going to do more finance talks. We're going to talk about what you could do to hedge against inflation now that it's here. God bless. Stay safe. Love you guys. We will talk soon. Peace out.
In the sky, switching time zones. The clouds open up for me. She got